Hello and welcome to Behind the Story. I'm your host, Eli Sherman. This week we're going to be talking about Hasbro, the company that brought you Monopoly and Nerf and Mr. Potato Head. They are leaving Rhode Island for Boston. And to discuss this big move, I'm joined by my co-host Kim Kalunian of 12 News and Alexa Gagosz of the Boston Globe. Alexa, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
This is among the biggest news of the week. It's been a very busy news week so far, and we're only to Wednesday at this taping. But Alexa, you've been covering Hasbro and sort of this, are they going to move, are they not going to move, for the past year. And she does a great job covering the ins and outs of it. But I thought, I want you to sort of step back from a little bit and maybe explain to folks how we got to this point of leaving Rhode Island.
I would argue that this is the biggest news story in business over the last year. I mean, I don't know what can possibly top this unless CVS decides that it wants to leave too. I think we need to go back to when the late Brian Goldner passed away from his battle from cancer. For those who don't remember, Brian Goldner was the CEO of Hasbro for a long time. He also kind of flirted with the idea of leaving Rhode Island multiple times, but our former governor, Gina Raimondo, had a good relationship with him, convinced him to stay. But when he passed away...
Which was 2022?
Correct. They had a couple of temporary CEOs until Chris Cox, who was kind of in charge of the gaming unit down in Seattle, he became in charge. And, he's a Harvard graduate. He really has no ties to Rhode Island. And he came in and wanted to shake things up.
He's from the West Coast, right?
He's from the West Coast, yep. And he was in charge of, Magic the Gathering, Wizards of the West Coast, Dungeons and Dragons, all of these gaming brands that I don't know anything about, but that was he was the president of. And again, so he came to Rhode Island the last time that he was really in the New England area. He was a Harvard student, so he knows the Boston and Cambridge area really well. And he started flirting with the idea of saying, I need to go to Boston. We need to attract some talent, and started working with some, real estate professionals and looking at places. This all leaked in September of last year, so September of 2024. Big article came out in the Boston Business Journal, and it kind of rocked the state, especially the politicians and business leaders here. How could we possibly lose Hasbro? All of a sudden, all of these ideas came about of how do we keep them? But to be honest, if you look, they were already gone. There was nothing that I think the state of Rhode Island, that the city of Pawtucket, the city of Providence could have done, and they certainly rolled out the red carpet to try to keep them here. Fast forward, there was, in November of 2024, there was this big meeting with some commerce officials, the governor, the governor's office, and Hasbro executives, including Chris Cox and his team, and they kind of offered the whole farm. They offered up to
incentives.
Incentives. It tallied up to about $100 million in incentives.
Wow.
It's not a small chunk of change, especially for a small state. They offered land deals on the 195 land for $1 per parcel. They offered 15-year tax abatements. They offered Hasbro Academy, which was basically, this new workforce development partnership between the state agencies and local universities. Think of how we, General Dynamics, different defense industries, we have similar partnerships.
So there's a pipeline of training for the industry. And in other words, if you're getting out of high school or even in high school, you want to figure out getting into the gaming industry. Rhode Island was offering to create a training program to create a pipeline of talent into Hasbro.
Yeah. And then there was the wacky ideas. We can put Hasbro in the mall. We can have a Hasbro experience for tourism. We could have a Hasbro state holiday. There was everything you could possibly imagine that former Secretary Liz Tanner was offering, that the governor's office was offering. And kind of along the way, Hasbro, Chris Cox, the current CEO, they kind of strung the state along, to be honest. And so when it was announced on Monday that they were going to be leaving, they were going to go to Boston, it really came to no surprise of anybody, including, our state officials, Mayor Grabian. He's like, there's no surprise, but I still maintain that Hasbro should be here.
And you talk about all of these reasons why the CEO was sort of adamant, despite the state's best attempts to move to Boston. But reading your most recent article, it's not really a big get for Boston, right? And what really can they offer them there besides, sure, maybe a shiny new building that's going to ultimately cost them more than what they're paying here in Pawtucket? What does Boston have over Rhode Island really in this situation?
Yeah, they'll be surrounded surrounded by massive companies, innovative employees, prospective employees, and that's exactly what Chris Cox is focused on. How do we build talent? And when you're in Boston, you're surrounded by schools like MIT and Harvard, and he is looking for the MBA candidates. He's not, unfortunately, and many will disagree with this, but he's not looking for folks that like grew up in Rhode Island and never left. Like, he's been pretty transparent about that behind the scenes, unfortunately. And so Boston to him is like the mecca of innovation. It's where Lego is about to move to from Enfield, Connecticut. And that is kind of a very similar story to Hasbro. Lego was based in Enfield, Connecticut for a really, really long time. Enfield is also kind of an old mill town with lots of farms. My grandmother lived there at one point. It is like not a mecca of innovation. There's 40,000 people that live there. And so now they're moving to Boston, and they're trading in an affordable place to operate for a pretty flashy office in the Back Bay of Boston. The Seaport District, while it gets criticism for lacking character, you can't really argue. I mean, it is where the best and brightest are right now. It's where they'll be able to pull in people, from all over the country and say, do you want to work here and do you want to live in Boston? That's kind of more appealing, I think, for like some of these younger graduates, these MBA candidates who may be coming from another area of the country. Like, you bring them to Pawtucket, and what do we have? We have an old, aging, working-class mill town that's, deeply rooted in Rhode Island, but has its own problems. The Paw Sox left. We have Memorial Hospital that closed several years ago, and it's just sitting there idle, frankly. There's been lots of plans introduced, and nothing's come to fruition. And it's kind of in the middle of this, like, how do I reinvent myself situation? So Pawtucket is not, like, the sexy choice for Hasbro. And I think that we need to stop saying that Hasbro chose Massachusetts over Rhode Island. It actually chose the Seaport District, the flashiest, rapidly developing area of Boston, over Pawtucket.
Well, I think in your story, Alexa, which is really good, people should go check it out. You wrote that them leaving is a symbolic and economic blow to the state. So, whether they chose Boston or whether they chose to stay, them leaving is having an effect on both Pawtucket and the broader Rhode Island business community. I'm wondering if you can sort of outline, give me about 30 seconds about what exactly it is that Rhode Island is losing with Hasbro going to Boston.
Yeah, I mean, it's losing 700 employees. It's going to lose the tangible taxes that it's paid to Pawtucket. We don't know what's going to happen to the property yet, whether they'll lease it or they'll list it on the market, but something's going to happen to that building, even if it just sits idle. That's a story within itself. But, I think that the symbolism here is the most jarring for Rhode Islanders, especially the politicians here. Hasbro has been our most constant over the last 100 years. It's one of our biggest businesses, but it's a global company with 5,500 employees across the world. Only 700 of them are based in Rhode Island, and they're moving to Boston. That's more symbolic than it is anything else.
Yeah, and I think we should note, too, that it comes on the heels of former chairman and CEO Alan Hassenfeld dying in July. Of course, it was his family that founded the business all the way back in the 1920s. And now Mr. Potato Head is headed for Boston. We're going to leave it there for right now and take a quick break. But when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about Hasbro and a little bit about food. So stick with us. Welcome back to Behind the Story. I'm Eli Sherman, here with my co-host Kim Kalunian of 12 News, and we're joined by our guest, Alexa Gagosz of the Boston Globe. We're talking Hasbro here. They made the big move, the big announcement this week that they're going to be moving to Boston out of Pawtucket after a century of being here. And unsurprising to us, even though this has been developing for well over a year, is that it has quickly become political fodder, we might say. So I want to play a little bit of sound, because the other big news this week is that Helena Foulkes has announced that she is going to be the Democratic challenger to incumbent Governor Dan McKee. And surprise, surprise, Hasbro came up over the last few days. So take a listen.
Very good partner for Rhode Island, so we respect that. I believe that the decision was not correct. I think Rhode Island is a place where they should be. We'd love to have kept them here, but we're more interested right now in the future and where we're going to go, and more jobs are coming, and we're going to keep people working, building constructing new space for those jobs.
I think the governor is either attacking our biggest companies or losing our biggest companies, and this is what you do when you're a desperate man and you know you haven't done anything.
Hasbro's been
So there you have clearly, what is foreshadowing to be a very contentious race between those two people and whoever decides to get into the race. But, I guess we talked about sort of the blame game here with Hasbro leaving. How much are you expecting that and business in general to be playing a role in both Pawtucket politics, where Mayor Donald Grebian is facing a challenger himself, and also in state politics, obviously, between Helena Foulkes and Dan McKee?
I mean, I think it'll be a huge conversation, and it's not just about Hasbro. I think everyone recognizes that trying to keep Hasbro here was not really in the cards. It would have been a shock if they actually stayed. But when it comes to, say, the Republican Party, they're definitely going to use this, and Helena Foulkes, they're going to definitely use this as like a punching bag. They're going to say, CNBC ranks us at the bottom year after year for the business climate. Massachusetts isn't much better, though. So, I mean, the governor could throw that back at them. But I really do think that this is going to be one of the biggest challenges, is talking about big business. And 24 hours after, not even, Hasbro announced that it was leaving, the governor released an ad attacking Helena Foulkes, but in the meantime, he also attacked CVS, one of the only Fortune 500 companies in Rhode Island.
And the biggest private employer in the state, if
Correct. Right. Absolutely. So, I mean, the governor will be taken to task on when it comes to business climate, when it comes to taxes, when it comes to business friendliness and bringing new companies to Rhode Island. He definitely went on the defense the day that it was announced that Hasbro was leaving with the so-called 36,000 private sector jobs that have come to Rhode Island under his administration, but many of them were with the help of tax credits. So this isn't just an issue of Governor McKee, though. This has been an issue that's been going on in Rhode Island for years.
Yeah, Hasbro's going nowhere.
Speaking of jobs, I mean, you mentioned before the commercial break, 700 people currently are employed at the headquarters here in Rhode Island for Hasbro. And, you said Chris Cox doesn't necessarily care if people are born and bred here in Rhode Island, but for the past 100 years, it's been Rhode Islanders who have been working at that corporate headquarters. What are you hearing from those people who are now faced with the decision whether to maybe move, commute, or try and find a new job?
Yeah, they're upset. They don't want to move to Boston. They can't afford to move to Boston. Their salaries are not competitive with Boston salaries. So I was actually leaked a recording of an all-hands meeting that took place where Chris Cox was addressing the entire company in Pawtucket yesterday, which was Tuesday. And he basically said, we're going to cover all of your commuter rail passes. There's not really going to be any parking passes. I don't know how long they're going to cover the train for, but he said in 2026 there will be a review of salaries. And there were plenty of questions from all the employees. One bright woman who says that she was an engineer, she said, I'm 3 years out of college. All of my friends who are the same exact age, same credentials as me, who are an engineer up in Boston, they make over $100K, and I'm certainly not making that. So are you going to match my salary to that? And he didn't have that much of an answer. He said, we'll do a review. But that doesn't mean that your salary is going to jump by 10, 20%. And at the same time, they also said that they're going to help with moving assistance if you're 50 miles or more away from the Seaport District. Well, guess what? Pawtucket and the Seaport District are 45 miles away from one another. So if you live in Woonsocket, I don't think you're getting that moving assistance. Maybe if you live in Narragansett, though. So I think that time will tell how many employees actually move, or if they'll do the commuting for a few months and then look for another job. The people I'm talking to, they're out.
Okay, well, people, make sure you go find that story, and good job getting that recording. Good reporting, as always. We have to switch gears, though, because I do believe that Kim might throw something at me if we don't take some opportunity here to talk about food, because in addition to the business community writ large, Alexa does a great job covering the food and restaurant industry throughout the region and writes a newsletter. Kim, what do you want to ask about?
I mean, so many things. I just love following all of your culinary adventures as you're trying all of the hot spots in Rhode Island. So what are you, how do you decide where to go, what to cover? I mean, it seems like Rhode Island has a pretty great food scene. What's your perspective on that?
Oh, I mean, Rhode Island has the best food scene in New England.
Yes.
Period. Full stop. I worked in the industry up in Boston throughout college, throughout grad school. I was a bartender for many years. And when I moved here in 2020, I was like, oh my God. Like all the food is unbelievable. You can go to the corner pub, you can go to a pizza shop, and it just blows Boston out of the water. So I launched the Food Club newsletter in 2022, as well as the Rhode Island Food and Dining section. And it's kind of just like me running the show and being able to just like go anywhere, try anything. I'm constantly talking to chefs and restaurant owners to see not just what they're doing in the new restaurant that they're opening, but also to like report on the challenges that they're facing every single day. So it's still some of that business reporting. I have a lot of fun. I'm the co-chair of the Northeast for the James Beard Awards. And so I'm not just eating in Rhode Island, I'm eating all over the country, but specifically all around New England. And I can honestly say that Providence is the best.
I love that endorsement. That's so great. I mean, I think we are totally spoiled by the food here. Whenever I travel, I say, oh, I can get something better at home. I truly feel that way.
Yeah, and I wonder, you know, I think one of the things that readers and viewers are so interested in is openings and closings. I can't believe the amount of like traction we get on stories like that. And I wonder from your perspective, how is turnover in the industry right now? Do you see a lot of it, or is it pretty steady?
You know, I think it's pretty steady compared to the rest of the region, to be honest. But at the same time, folks are really faced with the same challenges as they are throughout the U.S. I mean, people are hesitant to go out. They're hesitant to spend their money right now. So they're trying to figure out, like, at the end of the day, I need to get butts and seats. And how do I do that? So I think that they're thinking innovatively. If you're doing the same thing that everybody else is, you're not going to last, especially in Rhode Island, where we do have such a great food scene. So they have to think big. They have to think different. We have my last Food Club newsletter, we had a story about Mamere, which is a new restaurant opening at Neptune, the former Dean Hotel. That's by Michael Lester, who is the restaurateur behind the Dorans. And I mean, they're going to have like a huge following going there. I don't see them closing within a year. But there are some other places that are opening around Providence constantly, and the turnover is, you know, miraculous. Like, I cannot believe that they'll last a year and then they have to move on all over again.
Wow, pretty incredible.
I love how we sort of catch a lot of chefs coming out of New York who want to get out of New York, and they sort of trickle their way up north into Rhode Island, and we get to benefit from it. Okay, that is unfortunately all the time that we have with you, Alexa. Everyone should go and check out her reporting on Hasbro. Also, make sure that you sign up for her newsletter. That's the Food Club at bostonglobe.com. And Alexa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, when we come back, the stories we wish we wrote. Stick with us. Welcome back to Behind the Story. I'm Eli Sherman, here with my co-host, Kim Kalunian, entering into the final segment of our show, The Stories We Wish We Wrote, where we take a look at other great stories that are happening around the region. Kim, you have...
I always find something
usual,
a little
you
strange.
find something that is going to be fun to talk about. Why don't you go ahead?
So people who know me know I love animals and nature and all of that stuff, and I love fun random facts, and this combines those two things. Shout out to Isabella Jabilian over at Rhode Island PBS for going to the beach, noticing something odd, and remembering, I'm a reporter, I can find out what this is. She found these tiny gelatinous things called salps, which I had never heard of before. And she wrote up this whole piece about what they are, why they're here in Rhode Island waters. She's got great pictures. And I think the strangest thing, and I think you would agree with me here, Eli, is that when you look at them, they look like tiny, tiny jellyfish. But she found out that they're more closely related to humans.
They have vertebrae. They have spines that are similar to humans, and they're about. I mean, she had a picture of her holding
like a
one,
handful.
and they're tiny. But if you look very closely, you can see what appears to be a little spine running through them.
Little weird.
But just an awesome story that she found from just being out and about.
Yeah, it's like the best thing about being a reporter is like learning something new every day.
Yeah.
So great job, Isabella.
I have one that is a little alarming, and this one's out of New Bedford. It's by the New Bedford Standard Times, Frank Mulligan. It is called Police Investigating Pornographic Zoom Bombing of New Bedford Board of Health Meeting.
Ooh.
And it is precisely what it sounds like. Back in an August 8th meeting that was over video conference, there were about 40 people on this Zoom call, and it was hijacked by somebody who did not have very flattering things to show. And I read it. I mean, it grabbed my eye because of the headline, but it also is something that the FBI is warning against people. And it kind of surprised me, Kim, because I felt like this is something that happened at the beginning of COVID,
Sure.
the pandemic, when people were all pushed to Zoom and they were having these meetings and there were all these hiccups. But here we are, fast forward 4 years since the beginning of the pandemic, 5 years since the pandemic, and it's still happening.
It's still happening. And I think because, in some ways, Zoom is still like not totally familiar to all of us. We're like, how do we mute that person? How do we boot them out of here? It's not like when someone's physically in the room, you can have security or police escort them out. It's a little trickier. So just a fascinating thing. And like you mentioned, that it's still happening today in 2025. Yikes.
All right, you got another.
So I'm going to shout you out, Eli.
I really wanted to get to this one, actually, just to make sure it happened.
You and our colleague Sarah Grinelli had a great scoop last week. When I saw it pop up, I thought, I wish I wrote that story. It's called Trick or Treat. The Conjuring House is listed for auction on none other than Halloween. Sarah has been covering this closely, all of the drama around this house that the movie The Conjuring and that series is based on in Rhode Island. And there's been lots of issues with the business license and the owner of the house. And as you reported, it's now going up for auction. So if people want to bid on it on Halloween, they can do so.
Yeah, it's a really clever thing by the auctioneer to be offering it up on this day. And actually, Sarah talked to the auctioneer, and he's saying he's expecting that he's going to need a police detail.
Wow.
He's expecting that people are going to be showing up in costumes. So I think it's going to be quite the event because, as you know, this just has a following from all over the world.
Huge following.
People come literally from around the globe to come see this place.
Yes.
And I didn't know this, but apparently there was a movie related to the series that just came out. I'm not a fan.
Yes,
so
there
I
is,
didn't
actually.
know that,
Yes.
but it's only heightened sort of the interest.
Yes, I forgot that the latest installment of, I saw the first film in theaters. It was
Well, you have a fun story about
really
when you met
creepy.
the owner. Can you tell that real quick?
I didn't meet the owner.
the
I met one
Andrea,
of the
right?
girls,
Yeah.
Andrea, who grew up there and experienced these wild things, told me all about it. When we were recording, we had some technical issues, and she said that happens to her wherever she goes.
So creepy. All right. Well, we actually have more stories that we wanted to shout out, but I'm glad that we got to those, including the CRMC, EcoRI. Rob Smith wrote a story about them having a vote to reduce their quorum limits, but they couldn't actually have the meeting because they didn't have a quorum, which is very ironic. People should go check out that and others on our website. That's all the time that we have for today. If you want to see this full episode and others, you can go to our website, WPRI.com, or YouTube. You can also download this now as a podcast. And but that's all we have for now. For Kim Kalunian, I'm Eli Sherman. Thanks for joining Behind the Story.